Alrighty, so a few hours ago we talked about quite a bit of information regarding the brand new striking system for EA Sports UFC 3, but that was part 1. In this video, I'm going to cover the last bit of information that was released in the blog, which again, I'm going to link below. Go right ahead, check that out, read that if you're interested, but let's get into it. The first thing we'll talk about today is frame advantage, and my understanding is that the word frame in video game terms basically refers to the amount of time it takes for an action to occur. I will be transparent with you guys and let you know right away that I really don't know much about the subject of frames. I've kind of sort of tried to understand it, but anything that has to do with math in any way, shape, or form tends to completely stump me and make my brain go, what? So if any of you, perhaps those of you with a lot of experience with classic fighting games like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and all that, can kind of chime in and kind of elaborate more on this topic below, that will be greatly appreciated by myself and other viewers like myself that don't really understand the whole gist of frame and frame advantage. But right here it talks about a brand new framework that controls the amount of time it takes for certain things to happen when a strike is thrown. And it goes ahead and gives us a list of these things. The first one is called the execution frames. And this basically refers to the number of frames from when you press the input for a strike and when the strike actually lands. The framework also controls how long it takes for you to block, how long it takes for you to use head movement or lunge after you miss a strike. It also controls how long it takes for you to block or use your head movement or lunge after you land a strike. And it also controls the amount of time after a strike lands into your block before you can block, move your head, or lunge. And finally, it controls how long after a strike lands clean on you before you can block, move your head, or lunge. So basically, if I throw a strike and miss, how long will it take for me to return to my block after I miss the strike? If I throw a strike and miss, how long will it take for me to be able to move my head? If I throw a strike and miss, how long will it take before I can lunge again? Same goes for when I land a strike. How long will it take before I can block after I land? How long will it take before I can move my head or lunge? And then in reverse, if I get hit on my block while I'm blocking, how long will I be stunned before I can move my head or lunge? And if I get hit clean, how long will I be stunned before I can move my head, block, or even lunge? All of this has been carefully tuned properly to represent the risk and reward associated with throwing each technique. So this is something that players are really going to need to understand if they're going to be successful with striking. And this blog goes on to give an example with a jab and a roundhouse kick. A jab is a very safe strike to throw. For example, probably the safest strike in MMA to throw. As such, the frame values have been tuned to make it a safe strike to throw. It is safe in the sense that if the jab, for example, is fast enough that it cannot be interrupted, intercepted, and stopped by another strike thrown after you throw the jab. So if I throw a jab, after I throw it, there's nothing that you can throw at me that's going to be fast enough to intercept that jab that I've thrown. That's the way the game works. Second, whether you land or whether you miss the jab, you will always have enough time to block, slip, or otherwise defend yourself before a counter strike from your opponent is able to land. So if I throw a jab, miss it, or whether I throw the jab and land it, I can pull right back and block my head, or I can move my head, or I can lunge before you're able to counter that jab with anything. Now, that's not saying that I can't throw a jab and you slip it and then counter. You can do that. You can still do that in the game. Both of these properties make the jab the safest one in the game, but again, as you would expect, it also deals the least amount of damage. Now, you contrast that with the roundhouse kick to the head. This strike is unsafe, but it also deals a considerable amount of damage, way more damage than the jab, for example, and it also has the highest stopping power in the game. The roundhouse is a very slow strike compared to the jab. This means that there are several strikes that could land before the roundhouse actually does, even if those strikes begin after the roundhouse starts. Due to the stopping power of those strikes, if you land them early enough, they can actually stop the roundhouse from completing. And all these properties make the roundhouse a risky technique to throw. And also, if you miss the roundhouse or if the roundhouse is blocked, the recovery frames before you can block or slip is higher, it's more than the execution frames of some punches, for example. And this means that failing to land a roundhouse kick can put you in a state where you're both vulnerable and you have no way of defending yourself. So each strike has different frame tuning values balanced against the damage that it deals and the vulnerability it exposes you to. So anytime you get in a state or situation where you can perform an action before your opponent can, this is what's referred. This is what's called frame advantage. Really, really difficult to understand for me personally, but you get the gist of it. So that's it for frame advantage. Again, it could be confusing at first to understand, and I'm still kind of trying to understand it all fully, but you get the basic gist of it. Next up, let's talk about combos, combinations. Good news is that the combo system has been completely rebuilt from the ground up and the combo multiplier is gone. That personally makes me really, really glad because the combo multiplier in EA Sports UFC 1 and EA Sports UFC 2, I think it was way more prominent in EA Sports UFC 2. It basically encouraged players to throw, actually demanded that players throw long and unrealistic combos to maximize the damage that they could do. But that's not going to be the case anymore. Each fighter has different sets of combinations based on the strikes that they throw, as well as their skill set and proficiency in various disciplines of martial arts. Some fighters also have unique combinations assigned only to them, and I personally love this because it makes fighters in EA Sports UFC 3 way more unique, way more interesting to play with. This also means that you have to learn how to use a fighter correctly. You gotta learn what combos they can or can't throw. A good boxer like Junior Dos Santos will be able to throw more intricate boxing combinations than someone like Frank Mir, for example. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't combos that every single fighter in the game can throw. They absolutely are. In fact, the combo list was released on the Operation Sports Forum, and I'm going to make another video covering the list of combinations, but there will also be very specific and intricate combos that not every fighter will have access to. And this will make learning how to use fighters way more fun and way more interesting. And not just that, some combinations will only flow when a strike misses first. An example of this is a roundhouse that misses into a spinning back fist. And some of the combos themselves can only work when the first strike is able to land. An example of this is the roundhouse followed by a straight. There's so much more to learn about combinations this time around, and when you run into a player that has a good understanding of a specific fighter, for example, you're really going to know. And I'm personally looking forward to making videos showing you guys how to use very specific fighters, like, hey, tutorial on how to use Conor McGregor, tutorial on how to use Tony Ferguson, tutorial on how to use Junior Dos Santos, for example. We'll be talking about what combinations the fighters have, how you can mix those combinations in and actually be successful in a striking match. So that's it for combinations for now. Like I said, I'm going to make another video showing you guys all the combos in the game so far, so watch out for that one. Next up is range management. Now, this one's very important to understand because it's going to play a very big role in how successful you actually are on the feet. There are 5 different ranges to be aware of in the game. We've got the elbow range, which is the closest and shortest range in the game, and from this range you can land an elbow. And then you've got the punch range, which is a bit longer than elbow range, and from this range you can land a punch without lunging in at all. Then you've got the kicking range, which of course means that you can land the kick from this range without lunging. And then you've got the step kick range, which means that you have to lunge in with the kick to land it from this range. And then the last one is out of range. From here, you cannot land anything at all, even if you lunge in. Each strike in the game has a range from where it can land. Now, typically, the forward-moving version of the strikes extends the range of that strike by 1, and the backwards-moving version of the strike reduces its range by 1. Now, forward-moving strikes generally have more execution frames, which means that they'll take longer to land than their standing counterparts. In addition, each strike has an ideal distance where if landed from this distance, it's going to deal maximum damage. Elbows, hooks, and uppercuts are best landed or thrown at closer range, and they deal more damage at close range. Straight punches, straight kicks, and roundhouse kicks generally deal the most damage close to the end of their range, and landing them too close to your opponent will deal considerably less damage. So it's going to be really important to understand the correct range to land strikes from in order to land as fast as you can, as well as deal as much damage as possible. Another way that range will be important is when it comes to shorter fighters versus taller fighters. Because taller fighters obviously have an advantage over shorter fighters because of their length and their height. The game is going to make it harder for taller fighters to achieve maximum damage on strikes, and it's going to be easier for shorter fighters to achieve maximum damage with their strikes. With taller fighters, you're really going to need to find that sweet spot, that right distance where you're landing at the ideal range, and for the shorter fighter, it's not as strict. This will definitely buff shorter fighters, and it's going to make and encourage players to actually pick shorter fighters as opposed to always trying to pick the tallest fighters in the game. So I'm really looking forward to that. Imagine a matchup like Travis Browne versus Mark Hunt. I mean, now you pick up Mark Hunt, for example, you can deal way more damage with Mark Hunt than you could in EA Sports UFC 3. And even though it's not going to be so easy to get on the inside of a good player that's using a tall fighter, you're going to know for a fact that the tall fighter will have to be a lot more precise and figure out that right distance, that right sweet spot to be able to land shots on you. And you have more, it's more lenient for you as a shorter fighter. You can move in and just unload and do maximum damage. So that's it for range management. Moving on, let's talk about defense, which is going to be the last thing we'll talk about in this video. In a past video, I did mention to you guys that parries are gone. They're dead, buried, done. No more parries. You want to get good at defense, you need your block, you need your head movement, and you need your lunges. And we already talked about the controls for the block and the controls for the head movement. We've also already talked about how the block is still going to be high and low block, but it's important to mention that high block, unlike in EA Sports UFC 2, where you can kind of turtle up for a long amount of time, high block is not going to allow you to block strikes 100% of the time anymore. A head kick, for example, is going to bleed through considerably. One head kick on that block will bleed through considerably. And if you just turtle up and if you just depend on your block, like, you know, all these players that want to move back, turtle up, not do anything, just hold their high block, your block can be easily broken through with combinations. So no more turtling. You're going to need to combine your blocking with your head movement as well as your lunges if you want to be good defensively. And speaking of lunges, there are 3 types of lunges now in the game. You've got the basic lunge, the advanced lunge, and the signature lunge. And the basic lunge is performed by simply flicking the left stick. You can go left, you can go right, forward, and back. And you can use these basic lunges to evade strikes except the forward lunging, the forward basic lunge. The advanced lunge is performed by holding L1 on the controller as you flick the right stick. This does a more pronounced lunge. It covers more distance. You can still evade strikes with this advanced lunge, and it's also the ideal lunge to use when you find yourself with your back close to the cage and you want to circle off that cage and return to the center of the octagon. It's kind of similar to the advanced lunge we have in EA Sports UFC 2, but a lot more fleshed out. The final lunge is the one that I'm most excited for. This one is the signature lunge, and this is done by holding L1 and flicking the left stick. Not everyone is going to have a signature lunge. Someone like Dominic Cruz, for example, will have his signature lunge, which you can also chain with the advanced lunge to maximize his defense. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how players use Dominic Cruz. You can do the advanced lunge, and you can combine that with his signature lunge. And man, with all these tools, players can truly nail the art of counter-striking and use it like we never could in EA Sports UFC 2. And I'm personally really looking forward to it and looking forward to seeing how some of you guys actually use it. But that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. We've talked and talked and talked about so much. We've covered everything that there is to cover for now. If you have any questions at all, leave them in the comment section below, and I will do what I can to answer it. You guys always ask so many questions, and I do what I can to answer what I can, but don't stop asking. Any questions you've got, leave them in the comment section below, and I will answer. Don't forget, I'm going to be posting another video shortly showing you guys all the possible combinations in EA Sports UFC 3. So at the moment, watch out for that. If you've not subscribed to the channel, go right ahead and do that. I'm going to be posting videos from now on quite frequently because the beta is about to be dropped, and I'm going to cover the beta until the beta runs its course. But that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was informative, and I'll see you guys very shortly. As always, keep yourself safe. Have a wonderful day.